Okay, so one thing, now I can share. Okay, here we go. Everybody can see that? Yes, everybody can see the slide? Oh, I have to do one more thing. Here we go. Can you see it? Okay, great. So, um, today we're going to continue this saga of Shaul and in that war that he had. Um, and today I want to compare him to a different judge, Yiftach. And before we're going to do that, I want to dedicate today's class in memory of Zalman Harari, wonderful human being that left us about a week ago. And he was a fixture here at Betchekov. He was very generous man, wonderful guy, and we'll miss him. Um, okay, in the last two kind of chapters, the last two classes, we dealt with the war, and specifically last time with the war with the Plishtim and the two failures of Shaul. One with his the first war, and then later on with the Plishtim as well. You know, when he is he's passive against the Plishtim, as we discussed it last time, but also when he takes things into his own hands and he decides to bring the sacrifice against what he was commanded by the prophet, by Shmuel. Um, and if you remember, I mentioned that very quickly last time, that Shaul, during battle, makes everybody take an oath. And he says, I have that the English translation here on the top. ויואל שאול את העם לאמור, ארור האיש אשר יאכל לחם עד הערב, ונקמתי מאויבי ולא טעם כל העם לחם. Right? He wanted to take advantage of momentum in battle, and therefore he laid an oath, cursed be the man who eats any food before nightfall, and I take revenge on my enemies. And of course, nobody ate. Of course, so we understand that, okay? We understand that, but it seems that here Shaul also failed. And we're going to see it from several points. Number one, the pasuk says, "Ve'ish Yisrael nigas bayom ha'u vayoel Shaul et ha'am." Very unclear sentence, because it seems that this is something negative. Even though it says in, let's call it the positive context, immediately, but the previous pasuk says, "Vayosha Hashem bayom ha'u et Yisrael," meaning that God already gave salvation to the Jewish people. And it seems, according to the commentaries, that means that the word nigas here is nidchak. V'chen tirgumo idchik, meaning pushed, meaning that they were hungry because Shaul already made them take the oath that they're not going to eat. And according to this interpretation, that means we already see something negative, meaning this is kind of like the smoking gun. Right? This is already the gun in the first act that we're going to see later on. So it's already from the very beginning, we see something negative is going to happen later on. And indeed, that happened. So that's problem number one. Problem number two. Shaul says here in the second one, "Venikamti me'oivai." What do you mean, "Venikamti me'oivai"? It's not your enemies, it's the nation's enemies. Why the plural. Why my enemies? I will have revenge. Okay? And that also in complete contradiction to what actually Yonatan said. If you remember what Yonatan says, he said to his servant, Aleh acharai ki netanam Hashem beyad Israel. They were given, the Plishtim are going to be given in the hand of the nation of Israel. So the nation of Israel, the way Yonatan presents it, versus Shaul, who says, Venikamti me oivai, my, it's his thing. So it's kind of negative. Also, something negative is the outcome from that oath, right? Because the people, vaya'af ha'am, people were tired. Not only that they were fighting the whole day, the fact that they couldn't stop to eat, it definitely had an impact on them. And then later on, it says, vaya'af ha'am me'od, very tired later on they become. So it means that, yes, Shaul is trying to take advantage of the momentum and he wants to, on the surface, it seems like a good idea. But the point is that perhaps it was a better way to deal with that. And the fact that he forbid them from eating anything made them tired. So what are you achieving exactly? If your warriors are tired and they can't continue fighting so well because they get no food, okay, we're gonna discuss it later. Okay, then Yonatan, if you remember what happened was, Yonatan did not hear that oath that his father and that command that his father made. And what happens? He sees a honeycomb and he eats from that. And because of that, Shaul says that he needs to die. I'm making it a longer story short, right? I'm summarizing it. But the point is that Yonatan has a very reasonable argument. He said, Re'una ki oru einai ki ta'amti me'advash hazeh. My eyes were open when I tasted that honey. It makes sense. They were not eating anything. You eat something, you get some sugar into your body, and you start to function better. Oru einai, my eyes open. And the last point is that, as we're going to see, at the end of that episode, they sin, right? What they do, they take the animals from the Plishtim, and they don't shech them properly. They just kill the animals and they start eating them. And in order to deal with that, so Shaul shecht it properly and gives them to eat. But they sin, the warriors sin, and because they are so hungry. So it seems that in light of all those points that I just mentioned, that there's a criticism on Shaul in that particular incident, meaning making that oath. Why this is so important? This is important because it shows that Shaul does have the ability to control the people. If you really want it, he is a leader who can control the nation. That means that his inability to control the people in the beginning of the war was not because of lack of, let's call it, leadership skills, but rather because he was afraid of the Plishtim. And therefore, because he was afraid of the Plishtim, he slaughters the korbanot quickly. He does that. He doesn't wait for Shmuel. And it's not true that he said, People are leaving. I had no chance. I have no, I had no other option. I had to do it. The people were leaving. It's not true. We see that Shaul has control of the people when he really wants to. Nobody ate. Under very difficult circumstances, nobody ate. Nobody violated his command. He has control of the people. So it's not the inability to control the people, but rather it was his own fear from the Plishtim. Fear that has no basis. Because God told him, it'll be okay. I'm going to be with you. And God actually sent him to fight those Plishtim. And only when he sees that he's actually going to win that battle against the Plishtim, all of a sudden, he rediscovers his power and his authority. And it seems that here the text is also sending us a very strong hint to a story from the past. And the story from the past is the story of Yiftach HaGiladi, the judge Yiftach. Okay, we see the story of Yiftach in the book of Judges, chapters 11 and 12. He is described as Gibor Chayil, and he was the judge, he was the leader of the Jewish people for 6 years, and he fought and defeated the Ammonites. He comes after Yair, and after him was Ivtzan. We spoke about him in the past a lot, but Chazal actually condemned his behavior because he was an extremist and he was acting without any thought. And because of that, he brought a tremendous tragedy. What happened? So, to make a long story short, the elders of the Jewish people approach him. They ask him to become the general, whatever. In the beginning, he refuses, whatever, because some background issues. He was kicked out from his father's Nachalah by his steps brothers, etc. Make a long story short, he agrees, goes into battle, and he wins the battle against the Ammonite. But before he goes into battle, he makes a vow. And this is a very tragic thing. He makes a vow to God and he says that the first who greet him, first that said, והיה היוצא אשר יצא מדלתי ביתי לקראתי בשובי ושלום, והיה לאדוני והעליתי הוא עולה. The first to come and greet me, so to say, in my house when I come back in one piece from the battle, I will bring it as an offering to God. Of course, what he has in mind is a goat or a sheep or a bull or whatever. But the first one that comes out to greet him was his own daughter. And according to the simple text, according to the pshat, it seems that he did brought her as a sacrifice. He did kill her as a sacrifice to God. The commentaries obviously do not feel comfortable with that. And they come up with all sorts of explanations that he did not kill her. She was not physically sacrificed, but since she spent the rest of her life in solitary, it was as if she was sacrificed. So her soul was sacrificed, so to say. Okay. A lot of criticism on that, on that judge and on that story. Okay, why the similarities to that story, the very tragic story of Yiftach? Here you can do some, you can look at some art um, that inspired the story of Yiftach. Yiftach, you know, executing his own daughter here, whatever. Um, more in the Christian theology, but anyway, here are the points why I thought that they are the similarities between the two stories. In both cases, the leader makes a vow during a battle. Okay, both Yiftach and Shaul. Shaul says, nobody, cursed is the person who is going to eat by nightfall. And Yiftach, whoever is going to come and greet me, I'm going to bring it as a sacrifice. In both cases, the leader's child needs to pay the price. Yiftach, it was his own daughter that came. And in the story of Shaul, it was Yonatan who violated his father's oath. In both cases, that child is unaware of the oath or the vow that the father has made. In both cases, the leader commands the death of his own child. Okay, whether it happened or not in the story of Yiftach, but it was definitely the pshat indicates that probably it did happen. And in the story of Shaul, he says to Yonatan, Mot tamut, you gotta die. In both cases, the child accepts the verdict. They don't even argue. Yonatan said, okay. Ko ya'aseh Elohim v'cho yosif. Okay, and he says, Hineni amut. But he said, Avi patzita et picha el Adonai, aseh li ka'asher yatsa mipicha. Do to me whatever you have to do. And in the story of the daughter of Yiftach, it's the same thing. Do whatever you have to do. In both cases, we see the root achar. In the story in Shoftim, we said, Aha biti, my daughter, hachrea hichra'atani ve'ata'it be'ochrai. Okay, I'm defeated. Ve'ata'it be'ochrai. It's not so clear what it means. Okay, and in the same case of, and also in the story of Shaul, Vayomer Yonatan achar avi et haaretz. So the root of achar, which is a negative word, is used in both stories. And in both stories, both leaders crossing the Gilad. ותהיה לפתח רוח אדוני ויעבור את הגלעד. And the story of Shaul, ועברים עברו את הירדן, ארץ גד וגלעד. So we see those similarities. Question is, what's the purpose? Why, whether it's Shmuel or not, it doesn't matter. Whoever wrote the book of Shmuel, who obviously knew the story of Yiftach, decides to write this story of Shaul with all those similarities, all those parallels to the story, the tragic story of Yiftach. And I think that what happens is that the purpose of that is in three main ways. First, the fact that we compare the vows between the two, the vow that the two leaders take, it's kind of put a magnifying glass on the vow of Shaul, because both are presented as unnecessary and harmful acts. The vow of Yiftach is described immediately after the fact that the Spirit of God was already with him. And if the Spirit of God is with you, you do not need to make a vow. Right? Look here. Then the Spirit of God came upon Yiftach. He marched through Gilad and Menashe, passing Mitzpeh of Gilad, and from Mitzpeh Gilad he crossed over to the Ammonites. So he is already there. The Spirit of God is already with him. He is already winning the battle. He's defeating the Ammonites already. Only then, and Yiftach made the following vow to the Lord. It was harmful and it was completely unnecessary. And not only that the vow didn't do anything, but this vague description or this vague vow, whatever is going to come out of my, what couldn't you say? Like, you should have just like be specific. This is a serious matter. You making a vow to, so the first animal, say the first sheep, whatever that is, whoever. What is this whoever? Okay? And Chazal compare this to another act of Shaul. The Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit 4a says the following: 3 people entered God in an unreasonable manner. Okay, explanation: in situations where their requests might have received an unfavorable answer. To 2 of them, God responded reasonably, with a favorable response to their requests. And to 1, God responded unreasonably, i.e., unfavorably, in a manner befitting the unreasonable request. And they are Eliezer, servant of Abraham, Shaul, son of Kish, that's King Shaul, and Yiftach, Yiftach HaGiladi. So you see, the Gemara is already making that comparison. So it's not my idea to actually compare between Shaul and Yiftach. With regards to Shaul, son of Kish, he made an offer when Goliath, the Plishti, challenged the Jews, as it is written, and it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches and will give him his daughter. Remember, Goliath is threatening the Jewish people. Nobody volunteers. And Shaul says, whoever is going to come and fight against Goliath is going to get tremendous wealth from the king, and he's going to marry the princess. Okay? The man who killed Goliath might even have been a slave or a mamzer, one born from an incestuous or adulterous union, who would be unfit to marry his daughter. Nonetheless, God responded to him reasonably, and David happened to came to him. So the fact that he made something that is unreasonable, what is this? What are you doing? You're giving your daughter to whomever? Whoever is able to fight Goliath is going to marry your daughter? What is kind of craziness? This is unreasonable request. This is something that is And God says, you know what? I'm going to take care of it. And he sends him David. Okay. By contrast, there is the case here of Yiftach. Upon leaving the battle, he issued a statement as is written. Blah, 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 blah. We read about that. Okay. This might even have been an impure, non-kosher animal, which he had committed himself to sacrifice. Again, he was not specific. He did something that is wrong. You should, if you really want to bring korban to Hashem, you need to say the first sheep, the first whatever, the first kosher animal that gonna whatever, I'm gonna do it. Don't use those generalizations. Okay. The Gemara Americans, and this is what the prophet said to the Jewish people: is there no balm in Gilad? Is there no physician there? Meaning, couldn't somebody take care of that problem? So yes, he took an oath, he made a vow. There is no Beit Din, there is no Chacham who can, what we call, open the neder. What is this? A physician, that means a Chacham. Why then has the health of a daughter of my people not recovered? This verse alluded to the fact that he had sought a means to do so. Yiftach could have had his vow annulled. And it is written with regards to human sacrifice, and they have also built the high places of the Baal to burn their sons in the fire of burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command, and I did not speak, nor did I come into my heart. The criticism of Chazal on Yiftach is very, very clear. It was a stupid vow, and not only it was stupid, it was irresponsible. And not only that, he ran away from taking responsibility, and because of his ego, he was willing to sacrifice his own daughter. This is a tragedy that Chazal very much criticized him for. This goes against what God is interested. God says, the last thing I want is human sacrifices. Judaism is against human sacrifices. So what are you going? You're going to give me a sacrifice of a human being? This is exactly what I don't want, because you're going to feel good about yourself that you're so holy? Nah. You're missing the whole point. And the same goes for Shaul. You're going to marry off your own daughter to somebody that perhaps is not even worthy just because he can fight the Plishti? What kind of nonsense is this? So that's number one. The vow in both cases was unnecessary and harmful. Point number two. The reaction of those leaders when they found out who is the one who's going to pay the price. When it comes to Yiftach, we see the following. On seeing her, he rent his clothes and said, Allah's daughter, you have brought me low. You have become my troubler, for I have uttered a vow to the Lord and I cannot retract. Of course, that's baloney. Of course you can. Okay? At least that's a normal reaction. Tearing apart your clothes. What about Shaul? Shaul said when he finds out that the person that's supposed to die is his own son, Yonatan, he says, thus and more may God do. You shall be put to death, Yonatan. That's not normal. You're his father. Where's the remorse? Where's something? Which tells us that perhaps was already a rift between Jonathan and Shaul, but that's kind of side point. Maybe Shaul is trying to, that's his way of trying to secure his position as the leader. I don't know. But the point is that when you compare the two stories, Shaul looks even worse than Yiftach. At least Yiftach had human emotions, and Shaul was willing to go through that. Remember, Shaul is not the one that decided that Jonathan is going to live. He was not given an option. The nation demands. The nation said, it's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. So there's a chance that Shaul would have continued. And then the third point, which is the difference between the two stories, is of course the ending. At the end, the daughter of Yiftach is being executed. However, Jonathan is being saved. But he's being saved because of the nation. The nation demands it. And of course, it has to do with his personality, Jonathan's personality. ויאמר העם אל שאול יונתן ימות אשר עשה ישועה גדולה זאת בישראל. The people said to Shaul, Jonathan, who actually is responsible for the victory, he's going to die? חלילה חי אדוני ימפול בשערת ראשו ארצה. By God, we're not going to let even one hair, a single hair is not going to fall from his head. כי אם אלוהים עשה היום הזה, he did good with God today. ויפדו העם את יונתן ולא מת. And he didn't die that day. And it's interesting that that's exactly the same language and it's the same principle that the nation used against Shaul. It's exactly the same language and the same principle that he himself used earlier. ויאמר העם אל שמואל, מי האומר שאול ימלוך עלינו, תנוע אנשים ונמיתם. ויאמר שאול לא יומת איש ביום הזה, כי היום עשה אדוני תשועה בישראל. When Shaul is being anointed, not everybody accepts it. And Shaul's supporters want to kill those who do not accept Shaul as the king. And Shaul himself says, no, it's a great day for Israel today. No one is going to die. And this is exactly the same language that the nation is using against Shaul this time. And they say, this is a great day for Israel. No one is going to die when they talk about Jonathan. So if on this day, which is a festive day, a day of celebration, no one is going to die, and even it applies, as you said, Shaul, to somebody who might actually deserve to die, because those people, that was an act of rebellion against the king. Al achat kama v'chama, it's a kal b'chomer, even more so that this principle should apply in this case for somebody like Jonathan, who actually is responsible for this victory. Now, so this is the similarity, these are the differences, and this is the reasons. So what do we learn from that? We learn from that extremism brings danger. and can bring even into tragedy. And when you have rules and laws and commands and vows and all that kind of stuff, you always have to have special circumstances. We understand the reason why you have to have a law. You need to have order, but that could lead to fascism and to tragedy. And it's interesting that those principles, we see them also in the Gemara. The Gemara talks about this idea. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says the following. Once the verdict of a judgment has been issued, it is not permitted for you to mediate a dispute. Okay? Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, says it is prohibited to mediate a dispute. Why? Because we need to strive for tzedek. This mediation, by its nature, does not achieve an absolute justice. So you need to strive for justice. That's his opinion. And anyone who blesses the mediator is cursing God. Because by creating a compromise, by achieving a compromise, you are interfering with justice. Right? Because justice means one is right, one is wrong. Rather, the judge must assure that the true judgment will prevail at all costs. This is a phrase in Hebrew, Yikov hadin et ahar. As it is said, for the judgment is God's. Ki leElohim hamishpat. And similarly, Moses would say, let the judgment pierce the mountain. Yikov hadin et ahar. So Moses represent judgment. One is right, one is wrong. That's it. If I'm right, you are wrong. No special circumstances, no exceptions to the rule, and that is justice. As painful as it is, but that is justice. However, look at this. It's the same statement in the Gemara. At the same breath, the Gemara says the following. But by contrast, Aaron, whose role was not that of a judgment, was a lover of peace and a pursuer of peace. And he would apply peace between one person and the other. As it is stated, the law of truth was in his mouth, and unrighteousness was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness, and turned many away from iniquity. So you have on one hand this Yikov hadin et ahar, Moses, justice. On the other hand, you have compromise, mediation, peace. These are perhaps contradicting, but what is right? What is wrong? I would go with peace. I would go with mediation. I would go with that. And here is perhaps, I think, what the story is trying to teach us as well. We want to, in order for rules, a vow, rule, I mean, listen, Shaul is a commander. He is the chief commander. He's the king. You can't, if everyone is going to start asking questions about the command that they get in the army, then it's not going to be an army. However, every good rule needs to have some sort of flexibility. It has to have common sense. People need to use their common sense. It's got to be a logic there. It can't be extreme. It's got to be moderate. We have to always look what's the intent behind it and realize that always to every rule there are exceptions. This idea of no exceptions is something that is it leads to, it could lead to tragedy. I know that we can talk about like examples, but let me just like stop sharing this. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, we can talk about this idea, but think about it for a second. Shaul says nobody stops in order to eat during battle. I get it. I understand what he's trying to do. Take advantage of the momentum. Therefore, he doesn't want the warriors to stop for a 4-hour lunch break that would probably lead to a nap, and then they're going to lose the battle because of that. But there's a difference between that extreme, what he probably had in mind, and somebody while running, eating a quick granola bar, right? There's got to be something in between. The fact is that they didn't eat. He said, like, nobody eats anything. It actually harmed them. The people said to Jonathan, and he said also, we didn't have the energy. When I ate a little bit of honey, I was able to open my eyes. It's very difficult to fight when you're fasting. Same goes for Iftach, of course. This extreme, I'm sorry, that is this is justice. I took a vow. So I'm sorry, my daughter, I need to bring you as a sacrifice. What kind of BS is that? This is ridiculous. What is the intent behind that? What do you mean? You need to understand, God doesn't want human sacrifices. We need to have special circumstances, realizing that's not what he meant. You need to have flexibility. You need to understand what's going. These are like, it's completely taking it out of context. And there's like ways to work around that. The commentaries are full, and they say that it was, there was the priest, there was the high priest. Yiftach could have gone to the high priest, to Pinchas, and asked him to nullify the neder, the vow. But he didn't want to go because of his ego. So I'm the leader. I'm going to go to the high priest. He should come to me. And Pinchas did the same thing. I'm going to go to him. He should come to me. And because of that, the young girl had to die. So when you make rules that don't allow flexibility, they don't allow common sense, they don't allow exceptions, they don't allow flexibility, they don't allow they don't take into a consideration also the intent behind that and what exactly we're trying to achieve with that rule. And these are not good rules. Whether it's a vow, whether it's an oath, whether it's a rule, whether it's a command. And that's, brings us to even to our own reality today. I'm sorry that I use this COVID reality of ours, but it is on my mind. When you hear regulations and instructions, like in the beginning, no matter where you are, you need to wear a mask, even if you're alone in the forest. Well, no, it makes no sense. If I'm alone in the forest, I don't need to put on a mask. right? What's the idea behind that? I'm putting a mask because I'm protecting myself, I'm protecting others. Okay, fine. Who am I protecting exactly? The trees? Or for example, and this is, I'm going to say something that is controversial, I'm sorry, but you can quote it, you can quote me if also, I don't care. I was very much against closing the shul in the beginning. I said there are safe ways to continue davening the way they did that in Israel. You do it, and which we did months later, we started doing that as well. You do it with masks, you do it with distance, you do it outdoors, you do it in a safe way. There's no reason. So the point is that even if you're in safe environment, you can't daven in a minyan. That was wrong. That was wrong. And I told it to, it was a decision. It's like, that the rabbis all of LA actually did. I thought it was wrong. And I said from the very first day it was wrong. We have to definitely adhere to the rules. We definitely have to do everything possible to keep everybody safe. But there's no reason with that extreme. Everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to get sick. A little bit of seichel, a little bit of common sense, a little bit of, give people responsibility. And what happens? By the way, the CDC and the city of LA, whatever, they did the same thing. No to this, and we're going to tell you this, and we're going to tell you this. We're going to and what happened? Because of just generalization and all this, you don't let people, because everybody's stupid, of course, and nobody knows anything, right? So what happened? People don't listen to the rules because then it makes no sense. So in the long run, we achieved nothing with that stuff, and it's wrong. And it's exactly like telling the warriors, you can't stop to eat, not even a crumb. It makes no sense. It's exactly like you need to put on a mask when you're alone in the forest. It's exactly the same thing. And it's exactly saying, well, I took a vow. I'm sorry, my daughter. You're going to be brought as a son. It's exactly the same logic, that there is no common sense, there's no flexibility, there's no looking at the whole situation, there's no room for exceptions. And I think that if there's one lesson from that, is that rules have to have this elements. Good rules have those elements of flexibility, exceptions, intent, logic, common sense. Otherwise, it could lead to fascism, could lead to tragedies, could lead to danger. And that's exactly what we're trying not to do. This is it on this one. Next week, we're going to discuss not next week, actually. Next week is Pesach, I forgot. After Pesach, I think it's going to be a very interesting class. Going to compare the anointing of David and the binding of Isaac. The Akedah of Yitzchak and the anointing of David to become the king. I think it's a fascinating story. I'm just going to stop here. Hold on, Susan, just a sec.